Okay, I'm Jim, and this is my studio. I've been asked by several people recently to submit like a video to my website of what I do and the kind of art I make and things like that. This is my studio. It's kind of a lounge area. It's like where I entertain. It's not the gallery area. There's a gallery area, but it's currently in deconstruction. I'm changing it. And there's a shop area as well, which I'll show you later. Now, I'm going to talk about why I make the art I make and where it comes from. There's two components to art. There's the formal aspect, the actual form that you make, and then there's the conceptual aspect. Now, I've been making things for a long time. I've been making sculpture for 20 years. And I'm not like a painter, I'm not a conceptual artist, I'm a sculptor. I make things, that's what I do. And there's a point when you make things all the time where you get good at it. And you can make anything you want. So the first part of your art career is all about, how am I going to make this? Like, how am I going to build this big thing or weld this together, something like that. Well, I passed that a long time ago. So then I started thinking about why I make things or what I really wanted to make. And at the time I was doing minimalism, which is very simple objects. And most minimal sculptures are not that simply made. They're actually very complex and involve forms and concrete and bulldozers and all kinds of crazy things. And I'm thinking, well, if you're making minimal art, why not do things in a minimal fashion? So I started thinking about how things are made and how they've always been made. And I came up with a softball, or a ball in general. And the reason the softball is interesting is not the exterior of the softball, but it's what's inside the softball. Now, this ball is a bunch of string, and the string is wrapped and wrapped around each other, and it makes a sphere, a very simple, minimal object. And the process is as simple as it gets. It's essentially weaving. So weaving is one of the first things that was ever done. Here's a better one. Baseball. Nice strings. Spherical. That's the idea. You're taking a simple thing, and by wrapping the string over and over, it makes a perfect sphere. Or pretty close. You know, it's not perfect, but it's a sphere. So I got in this idea of bending things, wrapping things, and making simple, minimal object spheres. And I went to this. And this is a steel ball made out of the same idea. I took straps of steel and I bent them over and over, and it became pretty round. And I could have done it even more and get more round. It's like some kind of scientific principle. I can't recall what it's called. But you bend things over and over, and by bending and curving them around things that have been bent before, they eventually make a round object. So I'm making something that would actually be hard to make, but I'm making it in the simplest possible way to make it. So, simple spheres. So, I make these all sizes. This is a little prototype. And I started making really big ones. And when I started making big ones, I started thinking about like paintings and things like that. Like certain segments of the sphere would feel like a work of art themselves. So then I went to the wall and I made pieces like this. And essentially this is like just a cross-section of a sphere. It could be part of a larger piece, but it's more like a painting because it's two-dimensional. It comes right off the wall. And there's this whole traditional aspect of like shields and things like that, you know, things you put on your lodge wall that we've been doing since the beginning of time. And that's the kind of thing it is. It has a kind of utilitarian shield feel. I come from a blue-collar background, so it has like this blue-collar, rough feel, but it's also very aesthetic. Now, formal issues are like how you line things up, combine lines, things like that. Formally, I don't think too much about how I'm putting it together. I just put things where they appear good to me. And you know, if you're thinking about every formal issue, if you're trying to make everything nailed down, you're essentially designing. I don't want to design, I want to make art. And for me, art is like, say you're walking down a street at a creek bed, and you find a stone, and you pick it up, and there's something special about it, and you put it in your pocket and you take it home. It's like a spiritual object. So I want to make things that have a spiritual feel. I don't want to design things. I'm not a designer, I'm a sculptor. So I could build 100 of these things. And because I'm not trying to make it any one thing, each one would be different. That's the subconscious taking over and making the art formally what it is. I've made dozens of these. Some are dense, some are open. They're all different. So I was making these, and then I got in the idea of doing installations. And you can tell the studio's not finished. But when I built the studio, I put an installation in the wall. And here it is over here. And when I was a kid, I worked as a roofer, so I'm using traditional roofing materials, and I built this piece into the wall. It's just tar paper and wood. You can find it in any roofing job. And that's how I do big installations. And I've done things that size, and I've done things that are 100 feet long. They're all different. So I went from there, and I went to this kind of thing. And this is almost a traditional painting. But it still has the same kind of process where I'm layering and layering strips of wood, and it makes the sculpture in the same way. So if this was a layer of a sphere, this would be a huge sphere, like gigantic. And it actually, you can't see it, but it has a slight bow to it because it's thicker in the center and it's bent out to the sides. So that's the basic series of work I'm working with right now. And the next thing I'll show you is I'll show you how I build it. But we'll have to go to my shop and I'll have to take off these nice clothes that I'm dressed up for an opening, so what can I say? I'm not going to do it right now, but when I'm dirty next and working in the shop, I'll bring you out there and I'll show you that stuff.